You know that moment when the world stops spinning? When your pulse roars in your ears and all you can hear is your mother's voice echoing in your head, except she's been dead for 2 years? That's where I was, standing in a room full of laughter, champagne, and chandeliers, while my fiancée and her family publicly mocked my late mother. And what I did next shocked everyone and changed my life forever. My name is Mark. I'm 35, and up until 2 weeks ago, I was engaged to a woman named Vanessa. We met 7 years ago at a lake house barbecue hosted by a mutual friend. She was funny, warm, had this effortless confidence that drew people in. Within 5 minutes of talking, I knew I wanted to see her again. A year ago, after a long hike through Shenandoah where I nearly dropped the ring off a cliff by accident, I asked her to marry me. She said yes, and it felt like everything in my life had just snapped into place. What I didn't realize was that marrying Vanessa also meant entangling myself with her parents, Brad and Marie, the kind of people who treat every conversation like a microphone is involved. Always loud. Always center stage. At first, I brushed it off as eccentricity. But it wasn't just a personality quirk, it was a warning. A warning I ignored. Let me rewind a bit. My mom, Janice, passed away in March 2023 after a brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. She was 59. And in every way that matters, she was the best person I've ever known. The kind of woman who'd quietly cover your rent without ever mentioning it, who volunteered twice a week at a food bank even while going through chemo. My mom didn't ask for credit, didn't post about her good deeds. She just did them. And she helped Vanessa's family more than I can explain. When Brad and Marie's bakery was floundering during the 2020 lockdown, it was my mom who co-signed the emergency loan to save them from foreclosure. Not a bank. Not a cousin. My mom. She even fronted them $12,000 when their freezer unit broke down, and then refused repayment because, in her words, "The world needs your croissants more than I need a check." She helped Vanessa's brother, Trevor, pay off his final semester at culinary school. She babysat his twins when they couldn't afford daycare. She did all this while sick. You'd think that would earn her respect. Gratitude. Or at the very least, decency. But as the wedding planning picked up steam, I noticed Vanessa getting cold any time I mentioned Mom. When I suggested including a small tribute to her during the ceremony, maybe a photo at the altar, she waved it off. "It's supposed to be a celebration, not a funeral, babe." I let it go. Then I noticed little things, a comment about how Mom was too hands-on, a chuckle when Brad joked that Mom couldn't keep her nose out of other people's problems. They rubbed me raw, but I kept swallowing the anger. For Vanessa. And then came the rehearsal dinner. It was held at this pretentious French fusion place downtown that Brad and Marie insisted on because they knew the chef personally. They made a huge deal about hosting, talked about it like it was a charity project they'd graciously taken on. Every time I tried to get involved in planning, I was dismissed. "Just show up and smile, Mark," Marie told me. "We've got the big stuff handled." By the time the night arrived, I already felt like an outsider. Nearly every guest was from Vanessa's side. I had 6 people there. 6. My dad, my aunt, my best friend Nate, and a few others who could make it. The rest were Vanessa's relatives, Brad's business partners, and Marie's sorority sisters. It felt less like a celebration of our union and more like a networking event with free risotto. I told myself to keep it together. One more night. One more event. Then Brad picked up the mic. "Let's all take a moment to honor someone who meant a lot to Mark," he said, and for a heartbeat I thought he was going to say something kind about my mom. But no. He smirked and added, "Janice. Boy, she had opinions, huh? Always ready with some unsolicited advice. But hey, she meant well, most of the time." People chuckled. Marie chimed in. "Remember when she insisted on managing our books, even though we didn't ask her to?" Classic Janice. More laughs. I looked at Vanessa, waiting for her to shut it down. She smiled. She laughed. She didn't say a word. It felt like someone had grabbed my spine and twisted. My mother, who spent her last year of life helping these people, buying their equipment, feeding their kids, saving their failing business, was being used as a punchline. I felt my hands tremble beneath the tablecloth. And then Marie walked over during dessert, all sugary fake smile, and said, "I hope we didn't upset you, Mark. We were just having a little fun." That's when something in me broke. I stood up so fast my chair screeched across the marble floor. Every head turned. I could feel the heat in my cheeks, the pounding in my chest. "You think this is funny?" I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through the room. "What happened next?" "I called off the wedding. Right there, in front of everyone. But not before making damn sure they all understood exactly what they had just lost. You ever feel like the only sane person in a room full of smiling lunatics? That was me, standing in the middle of the most expensive dinner of my life, staring down a crowd that had just turned my mother's legacy into a comedy roast. And the woman I was supposed to marry? She just sat there, swirling wine like it was all no big deal. After I called them out, after I said the words, "You disrespected my mother, and this wedding is off," you'd think the room would have descended into chaos. But no. What I got was stunned silence, then whispers, then the sound of someone's fork clinking onto the floor. Vanessa's face was pale, her hands clenched around her napkin. I could see Brad trying to figure out if he should get angry or just chuckle it off like another one of his jokes gone wrong. Marie, ever the drama queen, looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Mark," Vanessa finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's just talk outside. Please." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to talk about." She followed me into the hallway anyway. We stood under one of those fancy wall sconces, the kind that casts soft shadows to make everyone look more expensive. She reached for my arm and I pulled away. "You really think they meant to hurt you?" she asked. "They were just telling stories. That's how they process things. My mom, she jokes when she's uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" I snapped. "That was mockery, Vanessa. My mom gave your family everything and they sat there acting like she was some meddling freak. And you laughed with them." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't know what to do. I panicked." "No," I said. You chose them." She didn't deny it. I left the restaurant and went straight to my dad's hotel. He handed me a glass of whiskey without a word. We sat in silence for a long time, just two men trying to find air after drowning in disappointment. But the next morning? That's when the real reckoning started. I woke up to 47 messages. Vanessa, Marie, Brad, a few cousins I'd never met. They ran the full spectrum, pleading, angry, dismissive. Vanessa's text swung between, "I'm sorry," and, "You humiliated me." Brad said, "Grow up." Marie's simply read, "It was a joke." But the kicker? Vanessa showed up at my apartment that evening. She stood at my door, makeup streaked, still wearing the gold heels from the night before. "You blindsided me," she said, voice cracking. "In front of my whole family." I stepped aside and let her in. Not because I wanted to fix things, but because I needed to hear it. "Why? Why didn't you stop them?" I asked as she paced the living room. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't think it would get that bad," she said. "They've always been like that." "I figured you knew." "No. You hoped I'd just take it," I said. "You hoped I'd keep nodding and smiling and swallowing it down so your big day could go perfectly." She didn't deny that either. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "I think you overreacted." That one sentence, it rewrote everything I thought I knew about her. Because if that night was me overreacting, then I had nothing left to give her. "I can't marry someone who thinks protecting my mother's memory is an overreaction," I said. She begged. She cried. She swore she'd make them apologize. But it was too late. I'd seen the truth, and worse, I'd felt it. Felt how little I mattered when I was inconvenient. Felt how easily she watched me burn while her parents held the matches. I ended it. For good. That should have been the end, right? Except a week later, I opened my mom's keepsake box, the one I'd kept locked in my closet since she died, and I noticed something was missing. Her locket. The one she gave me a month before she passed. The one that held a photo of my grandparents and a scrap of my first baby blanket. It wasn't just jewelry. It was legacy. It was gone. The only person who'd been in my apartment since the breakup? Vanessa. I texted her. "Did you take the locket from my mom's box?" She replied. "What locket?" I didn't respond. I called her. She picked up with a defensive. "It's not what you think." My blood ran cold. "Where is it?" I took it the day I dropped off the ring," she said. I wanted something to remember you by. I was going to give it back. You stole it. It's at my parents' place," she said. "I didn't want to lose it." She didn't want to lose it. I ended the call, got in my car, and drove straight to Brad and Marie's house. I rang the doorbell like I was knocking on hell's front gate. Marie answered. "Mark, sweetheart. Where's the locket?" I said flatly. 5 minutes later, Vanessa came downstairs with it in her hand. I snatched it, didn't say a word, and turned to leave. "Mark, please," she called out. But I was already out the door. She didn't just lose me that night. She lost everything. And she still doesn't understand why. I didn't cry until 2 nights later. It was around midnight. The apartment was dark except for the blue glow from my television, and I caught a glimpse of that locket, just sitting on the coffee table like it hadn't been dragged into a war. That's when it hit me. The woman I nearly married didn't just disrespect my mother. She desecrated her memory. I picked up the locket, holding it like it might crumble. I pressed it against my chest, and suddenly I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was 13, sitting next to my mom on a Greyhound bus. It was early October, a cold front had rolled in, and the bus reeked of stale coffee and gasoline. We were headed to Ohio to visit her sister, and I was furious. I wanted to stay home for my best friend's birthday party. I had sulked the whole ride, arms crossed, jaw clenched, headphones in. Until Mom leaned over and whispered, "You think I want to spend my weekend with your Aunt Marla's gluten-free lasagna?" I turned to her stunned. And she smiled this rare, exhausted smile. "But sometimes, Mark, you do things you don't want to do. Not for the people who deserve it, but for the people you love." That was her, always doing more than she had to. Always loving people beyond what they earned. That memory gutted me now. Because I had turned into her in ways I hadn't even noticed. I swallowed offenses, forgave too easily, handed out second chances like party favors, because that's what she would have done. But somewhere between forgiveness and foolishness, I'd lost myself. And now the locket, the very symbol of that selflessness, had been taken by the person I thought I'd spend my life with. So I did something I'd never done before. I told the truth, not to Vanessa, not to her parents, but to the people who always said, "Why don't you just get over it?" Or, "She probably didn't mean it." I posted it all. I didn't name names, didn't tag anyone, but I laid it out, the disrespect, the mockery, the theft. I wrote about my mom, about how she co-signed their bakery loan, paid for their son's tuition, covered equipment that saved their business. I wrote about the rehearsal dinner, about how they twisted her generosity into punchlines. I told the world how I stood up in front of 60 guests and walked away. And then I added one more detail, that my late mother's locket had been taken without permission and left at her future-in-law's house like it was a souvenir from a failed engagement. It went viral within hours. Thousands of comments. Hundreds of shares. I woke up to journalists DMing me, asking if they could turn the story into a feature on toxic family dynamics. Someone even found the Yelp page for Brad and Marie's bakery and started leaving one-star reviews with, "Tell Janice thank you for your ovens." I didn't ask for a crowd, but once they came, I didn't hide from them either. But the real surprise came 3 days later. My mailroom receptionist buzzed me from downstairs. "Mark, there's a package here for you. No return address." Inside was a photo. A blurry, faded print of my mom and me on that bus ride. Someone must have taken it from behind, the back of my curly-haired teenage head resting on her shoulder, her hand gripping my backpack strap like a tether. On the back, written in thick sharpet, "You got her heart. Never apologize for it." There was no note, no explanation. Just the truth I didn't know I needed. I should have expected it. After the post went viral, after their bakery's rating tanked from 4.6 to 2.1 overnight, after people started tagging #JusticeForJanice in every cupcake photo, they retaliated. First came the damage control. Marie posted a Facebook essay, 4 paragraphs too long, about how weddings are stressful, and how humor can be misinterpreted, and how some people are just too sensitive. She never said my name, but she didn't have to. Every thinly veiled jab was painted in sugar icing and faux sympathy. Then Brad made a video in the bakery kitchen, apron on, flour on his sleeves, looking like a cross between a hostage and a local TV chef. "We've always believed in kindness," he said. "But when someone weaponizes grief for attention, that's a bridge too far." That line burned. Weaponizing grief? I read that with my fists clenched. My mom bled kindness for their family, and now they were spinning the narrative like I was some bitter orphan airing family laundry for likes. But the worst part? Vanessa liked the post. No comment. No defense. Just a quiet thumbs up, as if to say, "Yeah? This is the story I'm choosing." I could have walked away. I could have let them crumble under the weight of their own lies. But some stories demand clarity. And this one had one last chapter left to write. So I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Mrs. Halbier. My mom's old friend, and a retired CPA. The same woman who helped my mom put together the financial plan that saved Brad and Marie's bakery. I asked one thing. "Do you still have the spreadsheet?" She did. Not only did she have the spreadsheet, itemized, dated, and signed, she had the email chain too. The one where Brad begged my mom for help. The one where Marie promised, in her exact words, "We'll never forget what you've done for us, Janice. You saved our lives." I compiled everything: loan documents, tuition receipts, equipment invoices, even photos of my mom scrubbing bakery counters during the early morning rush, just to help out when they were short-staffed. Then I made a follow-up post. I didn't rant. I didn't attack. I just posted screenshots, dates, proof, and one final message. This was my mom. Not your punchline. Not your PR scapegoat. Just a woman who gave everything and asked for nothing. And you mocked her memory to feel bigger. Now the world knows who you really are. Within 24 hours, their business page was flooded, not with hate, but with truth. People who'd been loyal customers now saw the full picture. One by one, they dropped off. Orders canceled. Events pulled. Comments piled up. "I can't support people who mock a dead woman to feel important." But the final blow came when Vanessa's own brother, Trevor, messaged me. He thanked me. He told me that for years, he'd buried the guilt of letting his parents minimize what my mom did. That he hadn't known they'd stoop that low at the rehearsal dinner. And then he said the one thing I never expected. "My wife and I watched the video." She cried. She said your mom reminded her of her own. I didn't reply right away. But when I did, I just wrote, "She deserved better." He agreed. That was the twist I didn't see coming, that someone in that family actually remembered. That not all of them had rewritten the past. It didn't fix what happened, but it reminded me that truth has ripples. Sometimes you throw one stone and it stirs the whole lake. And standing there, phone in hand, I realized something. I hadn't just ended a wedding. I'd defended a legacy. A week passed. Then 2. The bakery closed temporarily for renovations. But everyone knew it was code for damage control. Their online presence dried up. The sympathy crowd disappeared. Even their loyal friends stopped defending them. No one wanted to be the face in the photo of a sinking ship. As for Vanessa, she vanished too. No texts. No calls. No tearful doorstep apologies. And for a while, I thought maybe she'd finally realize silence was the only decent thing she could offer me. But I was wrong. I came home from work one Tuesday to find a small padded envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in neat, familiar cursive. Inside was the locket. And a letter. Not some tear-streaked apology. Not a last-ditch plea. Just a flat, resigned confession scribbled in black ink on plain stationery. I was wrong, it began. Not just that night. Not just about the locket. I was wrong about what love is. I thought love was making things perfect. Keeping the peace. But your mom, she didn't keep peace. She made truth louder than comfort. I never understood that until I lost you. She went on. Told me she'd worn the locket once, late at night, and felt like it burned against her chest. That it didn't belong to her. That it never did. I didn't just steal it, she wrote. I tried to steal the comfort you had. The piece of her that made you strong. I thought if I held it, I could feel like I mattered again. But I only felt smaller. She ended with 5 words that made my throat tighten. Please return it to her. So I did. The next morning, I took the locket and drove 2 hours to the cemetery where my mom was buried. It was one of those cold, brittle mornings that smell like damp stone and frozen earth. I stood at her grave for a long time, the locket in my palm, the wind pushing tears out of my eyes before they were ready. Hey, Mom, I said quietly. I brought her home. I buried the locket beneath the stone. Not deep. Just enough to place her back in the soil she belonged to, next to the woman who gave everything and still had more to give. Then I stood there and I told her everything. How I'd walked out. How they'd mocked her. How the world found out, and didn't laugh. And how I'd finally, learned what strength really was. It wasn't being silent. It wasn't keeping peace. It was knowing when to stand, alone if you had to, for the people who raised you to stand for something. I walked away from that cemetery lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because I'd honored it. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't just living in my mother's shadow. I was walking in her light.